Good afternoon. Won't it be nice when we can gather in person? We're all looking forward to that. Well, welcome to How Arts and Culture Shape the Identity of Edmonds. This is a part 3 of a 4-part Zoom series hosted by the Edmonds Waterfront Center. Today's forum is going to focus on the literary arts in Edmonds. Our last session, if you were fortunate enough to join us, was focused on performing arts, and that was presented by Joe McElwain of the ECA and former Mayor Dave Erling. My name is Daniel Johnson, and I'm the CEO for the Edmonds Waterfront Center. Like a blessing before we break bread, I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish tribes. The Coast Salish represent a large collection of tribes with distinct cultures and languages, and they've served as stewards of the land and sea for more than 14,000 years. So it is with great honor that we pay our respects to elders past and present. Today's topic on literary arts is presented by David Brewster. He's the co-owner of the Edmonds Bookshop. David's bio is up on the screen, but I asked him recently, so what was the most memorable aspects of your career to date? And he said, well, one was getting the opportunity to work with Pulitzer Prize author Philip Roth. So I thought that qualifies. And then he also shared about working at Starbucks, and he had the very cool job of interviewing famous musicians like Ray Charles and Yo-Yo Ma. And David, incidentally, I want you to know that my wife loves your bookshop, and she's a voracious reader and hosts our intergenerational book group for the Edmonds Waterfront Center. So those of you who have joined the forums in the past, you know how this works. David will speak for about 25 minutes, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. So if you have any questions during David's presentation, go ahead and just write those into the chat or Q&A. So with that, I would like to introduce David Brewster.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen so we can have more of a interactive experience. We are focused on the literary arts in Edmonds, and I've added the modifier and beyond because I definitely will talk about the region in some degree and the fact that Edmonds enjoys being part of a very rich literary region of the country. Brief bio, as Daniel mentioned, my wife Mary Kay and I own the Edmonds Bookshop. We bought it in 2001, which, if you can do math, means that we celebrated our 20th anniversary of owning the store this year. Next year, the store will turn 50 years old, which is both to us and to a lot of people in the book business a really cool achievement to have lasted an indie bookstore for all these years. I did retire from Starbucks 4 years ago. I worked in books and music and technology. I'm currently the president of the Edmonds Public Facilities District, which is part of the Edmonds Center for the Arts Infrastructure. I was, prior to that, also on the board of Edmonds Center for the Arts, and I've worked closely with the organization for going on 11 or 12 years now. In my background, I was on the board of Copper Canyon Press, a notable small press over in Port Townsend. And in addition to Starbucks, I've worked at Play Network, which is a background music company, and also for several publishers, as you see here. Mary Kay and I met many years ago as booksellers at the University Bookstore. We said we'd never own a bookstore until we bought one. And so there you go. Today, I'm going to focus on 3 general aspects of literary arts in our region. The first and longest of them is on literary programs and resources. Then we'll take a look at some local and regional authors, and finally a brief look at the local booksellers in Edmonds. There are all kinds of literary resources and programs in our community. In the next few slides, I'll talk about a few notable ones. I think most of us will recognize Right on the Sound. Right on the Sound is the annual writers conference that's sponsored by the Edmonds Arts Commission. It's a place of community gathering for writers and aspiring writers. It's always a really inspiring experience for most of the participants. Edmonds Bookshop runs a little pop-up store at every conference except the last couple when they've been online, and the next one as well. But we still sell the books of the authors who are featured at the Right on the Sound conference in the store, even if we can't be there in person. It was begun in 1985, so it's coming up on some important anniversaries as well. And this year, as I mentioned, it'll be online again as it was last year, and registration opens on August 9th. There have been a number of really prominent speakers and featured authors at the Right on the Sound conference over the years, and I've listed a few of them here. Charles Johnson, the great novelist, Kristen Hanna, who lives over on Bainbridge, a really terrific commercial novelist. Timothy Egan, hopefully you know, is a great reporter. Elizabeth George is a mystery writer. Greg Bear is science fiction and fantasy. And then Anne Lamott writes very memorable, sort of self-help, contemplative kind of works. Next is something called EPIC. Every person is creative. The EPIC Writers Group was started about 10 years ago with the idea of extending, at least to some degree, the Right on the Sound experience all year long, to be a place where people can bring in their writings and share them, to get some feedback from fellow aspiring writers. And as I say in the quote here from their website, to create and sustain a community of writers at all levels and backgrounds who share, encourage, and nurture literary and other creative activities to benefit the community at large. EPIC does open mic readings, a lot of small workshops. There's a monthly newsletter from them, and also an events calendar. And several EPIC members have seen their work published, which is really exciting. You notice on the blue here, that's a hyperlink, and I believe you'll be getting copies of this slideshow at the end. And those links will take you to the websites of the various things I've highlighted here. Next is the Snow Isle Library System. We're all familiar with the value and the power of public libraries. We all grew up, I hope, with access to a public library. I know many of us had our first real experience in reading more deeply due to a library. Maybe we didn't have quite the same opportunity in the school system, maybe not until high school at least, but I think for myself, I became a more avid and interested reader as a result of my local public library when I grew up in Portland. The Snow Isle Library System consists of 23 branches all over Snohomish and Island counties. And they host in all of those branches all kinds of activities, book and author events, discussion groups, story times for kids, writers groups. Currently in the pandemic conditions we're dealing with, they are open, somewhat more limited hours than before, and with some limitations on time of visit, and of course, the requirement to have a mask and keep distance from one another. They're doing a lot of activities still. They always have done so, but most of them, at least today, are still on Zoom. But I think if you visit their site or visit the individual branch sites, you'll see the many activities that the library system is offering. Here is our local branch of the Snow Isle Library System, the Edmonds Library, a gathering place for the community. It has a wonderful view of the sound from some of its reading rooms. Of course, it's attached to the Francis Anderson Center, so there's a lot of activity there as well. And one of the hallmark buildings of Edmonds. one reason to focus on it is another important organization locally, and that is the Friends of the Edmonds Library. They're a nonprofit that has existed in one form or another for going on 60 years. It's been formed and sort of reformed over the years as the library developed and grew from its original location in the old Edmonds History Museum, now right on 5th, to its present location on Main Street. Friends of the Edmonds Library is one of more than 150 Friends of Library organizations just in Washington State. And I think it's another indication of how strong support is from the community for public libraries and for reading and for all the programming that libraries can offer. There are monthly meetings for members of the Friends of the Edmonds Library. There is an annual book sale, which of course could not happen last year. I guess we'll wait to find out if it will happen this year. And they've had a number of kind of fun local fundraisers, most recently at Gallagher's and Burgett's. So at least for some people, books and beer make a really good combination. One thing I point out here, and I'll just mention it out loud, is the amount of money that Friends of the Edmonds Library has raised in about the last 40 years to support the library and the community it serves. It's $450,000 and counting is nothing to sneeze at. It's really exciting. Another way to think about resources and programs, of course, involves the internet. And I've highlighted a couple of blogs that you might wish to explore. First of them is Northwest Book Lovers. This is a blog that comes from the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Association, and that's a trade association that bookstores around the region belong to. And like lots of trade organizations, their focus is on the well-being of the industry and putting on trade shows and other educational work for booksellers. But among the things they do is this Northwest Book Lovers blog, which has lots of great articles, probably a couple a week, on new authors, on book trends, on various things of interest, not only to booksellers in the Northwest, but to readers. PNBA also issues annual book awards in fiction and nonfiction and poetry and children's books. And those awards are very helpful to local booksellers because it really raises the profile of those books to the local customer base and adds a little imprimatur to them, which we find really helpful. Literary Hub, or Lit Hub as it's often known, is more of a blog platform. There are daily newsletters, except on weekends. And each newsletter contains a good 10 to 12 different articles that you link to and read into, whether they be on politics or crime writing or a notable literary figure or a discussion of book jackets. There's a lot of inside baseball stuff on publishing and authors in Lit Hub. And I find it always interesting to discover some young writer or to hear a discussion from a book jacket designer about the choices she may have made around a particular dust jacket. Some really interesting stuff there. One other resource that's worth pointing out is Seattle Arts and Lectures. You may know Seattle Arts and Lectures has been around for many years now. They always feature every year a really robust assortment of authors and public figures who in the past, recent past, would fill a big theater space downtown and delight the audience with a reading or a discussion of their book, and always followed by an interview from an SAL staff member with that author. They also do have a really great Writers in the School program. And one of the benefits of that is that each Seattle Arts and Lectures presentation is opened by a student reading his or her work, a student having come from one of the programs. And that often has a really inspiring effect on the audience and makes us ready and willing to experience the main featured author's content. So really cool literary gathering. And we hope, of course, like everything else, to be able to get back to those in person. Here's a shot of something I hope you're familiar with, a couple of our little free libraries around town. And again, staying in sort of the umbrella of programs and resources, we have both those little free libraries, which I'll touch on again in a minute, and also our so many book clubs and discussions around our town. The Edmonds Bookshop has one. I believe Never Ending Bookshop has a book club. Your own Edmonds Waterfront Center has a intergenerational book club, which I'm told is really cool and has participants from around the country. Snow Isle libraries have their book clubs and discussion groups. And there are many individual private groups doing book clubs. My wife belongs to one that's been doing a monthly gathering for easily 15 or 20 years. And it's all women. So all the men, all us husbands and partners used to at least get together at the same night and try and solve the world's problems while our loved ones were avidly discussing their latest book. Another resource along with that is the Creative Retirement Institute at Edmonds College. And like you, I have taken a number of classes there. There are always every quarter some good offerings on books, whether it be authors or literary genres or other aspects of reading and literary academic inquiry. Really great classes every quarter at Creative Retirement Institute. And again, on the little free libraries, there are more than a dozen just in Edmonds. This is a national program, and people build them and put them up and register them. And you can go to the little free library site and see a map of them, which is pretty cool. But they have a really powerful connection to the community, because as you're out for your daily walk or whatever, and you wander by one of these little libraries and the spine of a jacket, a book attracts you, and you pop it open, and all of a sudden you've got a book in your hand you can take with you. And when you're done, or when you're done with a different book, feel free to come back and put it back in the library. It's a free and widely used service, not only in Edmonds, but kind of all over the place. And it does add some character to our little town, which I think is great. Next, we're going to focus on local and regional publishers. There are a number of small to medium-sized independent publishers in the Northwest. They cover a variety of topics, literature and children's books, academic work, regional interest titles, comics, gift books, all kinds of things. And I've listed sort of the major ones here. That second paragraph looks at those in the Seattle area, and the third paragraph looks at those in the Portland area. Just to dwell on this for a minute, Becker and Mayer is a book packager. So they take concepts like a children's game and turn it into a book, or someone has a cookbook concept and they'll package that together with the photographs of the food and the recipes and everything. So it's not all just a single author, but the work of a team. Copper Canyon Press, I mentioned, they are probably the most prominent poetry publisher in the United States. And they've published a number of Pulitzer and National Book Award winners. They have a wonderful team of people who work out of an old Canon repair shop at Fort Worden. And they've been at it for 40, 50 years now. And I was pleased to be involved with them for for many years on the board, and I'm still a big supporter of theirs. Fantagraphics is a comic and graphic novel publisher. Mountaineers Books, you probably know, regional travel and mountaineering, hiking guides, and so on. Rose Alley Press is a small poetry publisher down in Seattle whose work we feature every April at the bookstore as part of Poetry Month. Sasquatch Books is probably our strongest regional publisher in terms of cooking and travel, local history, lots of great publications from Sasquatch. University of Washington Press, of course, very well-established academic publisher. And Wave Books is a newer poetry press, again, based in Seattle, well-funded and doing some very nice work. Down in Portland, you have Beyond Words, which is kind of a self-help publisher. Dark Horse Comics, kind of self-explanatory. A Harvest House is a Christian publisher. Pomegranate does a variety of nonfiction titles. Timber Press is a little more academic. And then Tin House, relatively new to the region, is an up-and-coming literary publisher. They've had a number of recent successes, and it's great to see all of these publishers thriving in our region. I'm going to move on to some local and regional authors. And I'll just say at the top here that we have a really rich literary history in the Northwest. There are any number of very nationally prominent, even worldly prominent authors who either live here or have spent a lot of time here teaching perhaps, or whose work and subject matter is relative to the Northwest, whether it's set here or it's written about a particular piece of Northwest history. And I won't read all these names here, you can read them, but I hope you'll recognize that most of them are, at least in readers' worlds, household names, and they're names of, they're authors of a whole variety of different kinds of books, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, children's books, and so on, cookbooks. And all of them have made a mark on our behalf, on the Northwest's behalf, in readers' consciousness around the country. Here are three novels by Northwest writers with very strong connections to our region. And I'll mention them in the next slide a little bit, where I've noted more local fiction and poetry, as well as mystery and science fiction. Ivan Doig, I hope you all know, is a preeminent writer about Montana. He did pass away a few years ago, but his works live on, and he's been a remarkable model for a lot of writers growing up in the region. Jim Lynch, a younger writer who now I believe has 3 or 4 novels under his belt, but Highest Tide was his first book and made a really great mark on a lot of readers in the Northwest. A story about a young boy coming of age at the very south end of the Salish Sea, down by Olympia, and some interesting chapters in his life that really are quite meaningful. Carl Malantes lives over in Redmond. His most recent book is Deep River, and it's a beautiful telling of the Finnish population that settled in southwestern Washington as logging people and fishermen and so on, and the whole culture of Finland that was sort of reestablished in that corner of our state. Couple other just to mention here, Bethany Reed is a local poet. John L. Wright, you may know, he's a local gentleman, a wonderful poet, a retired doctor. The Edmonds Writing Sisters have done a really nice anthology called Writing in Place, poetry and fiction. And some local mystery and science fiction writers you may know. A couple of these have been really good sellers at the bookshop, Alice Boatwright for one. And there's a lot of interest in sort of escapist fiction by our local writers. Here are three prominent nonfiction titles from Northwest writers. Timothy Egan, a pilgrimage on an old pilgrim trail, as the subtitle says there, from Canterbury to Rome. And he, of course, is a very prominent journalist and reporter for formerly of the New York Times, and has written extensively about the Northwest. Cisco Morris, our favorite local gardening geek, and his most recent book, Oh La La. And then, of course, a very important book, So You Want to Talk About Race, by Ijeoma Olowu, who lives down in Shoreline and has really helped a lot of readers understand the challenges and the issues around all the issues that came really to the fore last summer, but which, of course, we've been dealing with all our lives, and well worth a read. Again, just a brief list of notable nonfiction and cookbooks, as well as notable children's, young adult, and young readers. Just a couple to point out here. Northwest Trees by Stephen Arno and Ramona Hammerly is a really terrific guide to the nature around us. Renee Erickson's Getaway, she's a very prominent Seattle chef. This is her most recent book of recipes based on travels around the world. Similarly, Rachel Yang's book, My Rice Bowl. She's another very prominent Seattle chef of Korean heritage. And so there's a lot of really great Korean influenced recipes in that. On the notable young adult and young readers side, Jennifer Bardsley, you may be familiar. She has a regular column in the Everett Herald on Sundays. She's written a whole bunch of really great young adult, or as we say, YA novels. Whale of the Wild by Suzanne Selfors. She's actually another local bookseller over on Bainbridge, and really wonderful book about orcas. And then a quick look at some picture books. Lying Awake, Every Critter Has a Tail, and can't remember the title all of a sudden, Little Wolf's First Howling. All really beautiful picture books from local writers. Sue Kochia, you may know, has really a whole cottage industry of her own on the beautiful artwork on her cards and gift items, adult coloring books. She's done a whole bunch of great stuff. Sorry, there we go. And here we go with another short list of recent children's books by local writers. And again, you'll have this in your deck. And finally, just a really quick word on the local bookshops in our area. Edmonds Bookshop, as I mentioned, my wife and I owned it, have owned it for the last 20 years. It was established 50 years ago next year. It's your local bookstore. We do all kinds of services, ordering special orders, free deliveries, free domestic shipping, free gift wrapping. And more recently, a cute little store in Perrinville popped up called Never Ending Bookshop. Annie Carl, the owner, originally had her shop in Bothell. And I think 3 or 4 years ago, she made the move to Perrinville. She focuses really on a few genres, sci-fi and fantasy, romance, mystery, YA, and children's books. And she also does reading groups and events in her store, just like we do. That's kind of it for me. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But before I do, I want to thank the audience for joining us, and I hope you got something useful out of this. So thank you very much.
David, thank you. That was a great tour of the literary landscape of the area here. So thank you. Really appreciated your recommendations on different books and different authors. So that was awesome. So we do have a few questions. We have a few minutes left. And so
Sure.
One question was, How have booksellers and Edmonds Bookshop in particular dealt with the pandemic? I think that's on everyone's mind.
Well, I think like a lot of businesses, of course, a year ago, a little more than a year ago now, we had to shut down and keep the door closed and the lights off. For about 3 months, March through almost the end of June, we were closed. We were doing online business, and I was doing deliveries every day, and we did a lot of shipping. And we noticed our online business really jumped, which was gratifying. We also received some very, very kind donations from a couple of major customers of ours who felt it was important for them to help us keep going. We reopened at the end of June. And of course, everyone was being very careful then, as were we, and we kind of kept that model up to today. We still have limited capacity in the store, requiring masks and hand sanitizing and all of that. I'm happy to say that as fall came around and the holiday season, business really picked up, and we were very, very gratified by the amount of support we received from the local community, as well as our fellow business owners in downtown Edmonds. It made a real difference to us, I can say.
So another pandemic question is, just from your observations, what effect has the pandemic had on readers?
I think the obvious answer is that people have been reading more. And we've certainly seen that in the last 6 months or so as the business got back up again. The other thing I would say is that we've noticed a lot of activity in audiobooks. We sell audiobooks through an audiobook partner, and they're called Libro FM, libro.fm. If you go to our website, you can find all about that. But a lot of people, because we're all walking around and many of us have earbuds or headsets on, we're listening as we walk. And in fact, I just came back from a walk this morning, having listened to a couple of podcasts. And so there's a lot of that kind of absorption of content through our ears rather than our eyes. And yet still a lot of readers, a lot of interest in books, a lot of deeper reading. We notice people reading older titles and exploring authors' careers. And so that's been really, really fun for us to help them discover books.
One of the viewers had a question about other resources for even constructing your tiny library.
Well, I have one friend who's built a couple. I think a lot of folks just see that, and somebody has a workshop in the garage they haven't used in a while, and they decide, oh, I'm going to do that. That site, the Little Free Library website, I believe has plans that people can download and just start cutting wood up. I do know from a recent kitchen remodel we're beginning that lumber is very expensive these days. So you might think twice. You might look around for some scraps to build with rather than go out to Lowe's and buy something. But they're not that hard to do. It's a box with a window. It needs to be, as we talked about yesterday, it needs to be watertight, because after all, these are out in the open and there are books on the inside, and nothing worse than a soggy book. So
I have a question for you, and it's miraculous that you have survived as you have the pandemic, but you're still operating in the era of the billion-pound gorilla Amazon. And I know that there are a few of you out there, but what's sort of your secret to your success? Because clearly you have cracked that code.
I think there's maybe 2 or 3 elements. First of all, customer service. We're not an algorithm. We are real people with real opinions. We're happy to share them. We can have real conversations across the counter or on the phone or an email about readers' interests. We can make recommendations based on what they tell us and what we know they might like. And that personal connection is probably the most important part. Having owned the store for 20 years and gone through, first of all, the chains were really big when we bought the store, Barnes & Noble and Borders. and Crown Books. And then, 10, 12 years ago, Amazon really got going. There was a while there where, and you've probably heard this term, of showrooming. People would come in and see a book on our shelf and maybe even take a picture of it and then go on Amazon and buy it. And of course, we discouraged that to the extent we were aware of it. But I would say things have switched now. People come in and on their phone, they have an Amazon page up and they go, "Do you have this book?" And it's really nice to see that. I think like other things, people make choices about their ways to consume media. Some people are wedded to Amazon and other people are wedded to physical books. I think that goes for music, it goes for movies, lots of different media. So we just feel we've been fortunate to sustain ourselves through that and to be a trusted place for so many customers to come and buy physical books. And we're grateful, of course.
Well, I think it comes down to buying local, supporting, the folks who are living in our community, who are running stores and shops like yours. So we appreciate that you're here. We've run out of time. Thank you, David. It's really been a great forum. Thank you. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more. And I know everyone's going to be looking forward to getting the link to the recording. So before we sign off, I do want to just remind everyone that the fourth and final forum is going to be on May 26th, and it's going to focus on outdoor art. And that's going to be presented by Francis Chapin, Arts and Culture Manager for the City of Edmonds. So you will not want to miss that one. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.